is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Check us out on the web at jsparty.fm. There you'll find lists of our recommended and popular episodes, clips, aka JS Party, the good parts, and a request form so you can let us know what you want to hear about on the pod. Big thanks to our partners at Fly.io. Over 3 million apps have launched on Fly. Deploy yours in 5 minutes. Learn how at Fly.io. Okay, hey, it's party time, y'all. Hello, JS Party animals. It's Jared, your internet friend, and I am joined today by a new friend, Eric Bailey. Hey, Eric, welcome to JS Party.
Hey, y'all. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. So, according to your website, you are an inclusive design advocate, a writer, a developer, a speaker. You also are a worker at GitHub currently. And I would love to talk about all those things. But first, I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah, let's get into it. Let's get nerdy.
Because this is how I was like, I had been following your work for a little while, and when I saw your Dungeons and Dragons post, I was like, gotta get Eric on the show because you struck a nerve. Although I personally have not played D&D. I'm a kindred spirit to D&D, but I actually did not play D&D growing up. Did you?
Well, first of all, that's a problem we can fix. So if you ever want to do a one-off session, just hit me up.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a gigantic nerd. So I've played more editions of D&D than I care to admit. And yeah, you're looking at a founding member of my high school role-playing game club.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, even though I didn't play D&D itself, I'm also a nerd and a role-playing game fan. I did play another tabletop game called Shadowrun. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Shadowrun.
That's the good stuff.
And that was kind of my tangential adjacent relationship to Dungeons and Dragons. Even though none of my friends were Dungeons and Dragons nerds, I did hang out with some Shadowrun nerds, and we definitely had long sessions where we would describe what we were going to do in Shadowrun. So I feel like I know what it's like to play D&D, even though I haven't.
Oh yeah, that totally qualifies. It's wild also to like go from high school where it's like, you know, the shame of kind of just being like, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to D&D club. Don't tell. To like, people are doing like sessions and they're filling out literal like honest to God stadiums, and like people are paying tickets to watch other people play D&D, and I'm like,
wow,
what
stadiums even
happened? Yeah.
Well, as Jeff Kanata used to say back in the early aughts when his podcast / show, which was called The Totally Rad Show, was earning awards and winning things. This was like basically a show that commented on pop culture. He would always say, nerd is the new cool. And that was kind of his saying. And I think that was very much true then. And I think it's become so true that it's almost cliche at this point. Like nerdy stuff is cool now. So hooray.
Hooray.
So the reason I bring up Dungeons and Dragons isn't just merely to bring it up because you wrote this post about how it taught you everything you need to know about alt text. You know, those stinking alt tags that or properties that we are supposed to put on things, and we either don't or honestly don't know what to write in there half the time. And so I'd love to talk about that, pick your brain. And where I honestly get stuck on alt text is especially on a element that has a title as well, is like, am I being redundant? Do I need the alt text if there's a title? Should they be different? What's the best practice in your strategy, and what did you learn about that from Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah. So D&D didn't teach me about the title attribute, but you know, hope springs eternal. We could definitely have a standards-based campaign world.
There you go.
Yeah, I think in terms of good front-end practice, if at all possible, excise the title attribute from your images. It's got a very narrow use case, and that's basically the iframe element where you kind of just describe what the iframe has inside of it. And the reason for that is if you're using a screen reader and you hit an iframe element, it'll say, you know, what's going on inside here. And then you can say like, yeah, I want to explore that more, or nope, I don't really want to pay attention to that. That's really handy for
Gotcha.
things like YouTube videos, where it's like before you get into a whole player, it's like, do I even want to watch this video?
Okay, so I can just leave title off from now on.
Yeah, just live free, you know?
I like it. Less work.
Less work.
I don't feel redundant. I can just simply fill out the alt tag. I keep calling it a tag. It's a property. It's an attribute. I can fill out the alt attribute, but what do I write in there? So I've had a few different tries at this. I mean, you're trying to like describe what's in the image basically, and that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah. There's definitely like, I mean, it's not the most inclusive term, but like choice paralysis, where, you know, you're faced with a blank sheet of paper and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I even do here? The little trick I like to teach people, like at work and not at work, is pretend like you're describing a photo you're looking at to a friend you're talking on the phone with. And like that picture is communicating something that other person really needs to know. So like, hey, it's this is our friend Dave, and he's standing in front of a fire station, and he's given 2 thumbs up, and behind him is a fire truck with its lights blaring and firefighters like grinning and waving at the camera.
So did you learn that from D&D then?
I didn't learn about fire engines from D&D. But,
How do you tie D&D back in?
Yeah. So in the post, there's a if you haven't read the article, there's a thing called Dragon Magazine, which was sort of like a fan magazine for the game, and there was an advice column. And in the advice column, somebody was being like, I feel my players are getting bored and they're kind of confused. And the advice that the advice columnist, like Dear Abby, but for D&D, I love it, was like, describe the most important thing first. So it's like, when you walk into a room, do you want to know what kind of carpet's there, what color the walls are painted, what kind of art they have hanging up, you know, what food is on the table? Or do you want to know the house is on fire and the room is currently ablaze? Like, you got to take the most important thing first, put it up in front. And that gives somebody something to react to, which lets them kind of make an informed choice if they want to keep listening to what the description is or, you know, move on.
I like that. Most important thing first. Is there a limit? Is there too much?
Yeah, yes and no. So if I can dive into this a little bit,
Sure.
There's a myth out there that there's a max character limit on the alt attribute, and platforms like, you know, Mastodon, I'm always going to call it Twitter. It's not X, it's Twitter. Instagram, they'll actually impose a character limit, and that's kind of, I think, just to prevent somebody from doing bad things. But as long as it's a single uninterrupted string of text, it can be as long as it needs to be to describe the thing you're describing. So like, there's a little bit of an art to it, where it's like, if you're describing a painting, you might want to go ham on like the quality of the paint and the brush strokes and like, you know, the topic and like the mood it evokes. So it might be a little bit longer. But if it's something that's like mostly informational, like say it's a screenshot of a news headline, you just want to say what the headline says and maybe a little bit of extra context of like, this is a photograph of a newspaper.
Yeah. One alt that I find myself writing often is I'll take a screenshot of our changelog news stories for the week, where it's like the main headline and then a list of here's all the other stories. And I'll just like do a square shot of that for Instagram and for LinkedIn and stuff. And it's completely inaccessible to anybody who can't see, obviously. And so I'll fill out the alt text. And for that, I just go back to the original source text and just paste it in. So it's like, it's basically the same thing. Is that a good move?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's a really, you know,
Okay.
I love that you're kind of saving yourself the effort by copying and pasting.
Yeah. Why not, right?
Yeah. And I mean, as somebody that reads the newsletter, I appreciate it. Like, I've definitely had a situation where I was on the train and the internet crapped out and I was still able to read the text on it. So it's one of those,
nice.
like, I see what you're up to there. Like, yeah, game acknowledge game.
That's cool. I appreciate that. You always wonder if it's worth your effort, you know, because we can talk about accessibility and audience size and like, you know, the percentages game. And of course, if you have so much time and money to apply, how important is it? You're an advocate. So of course, very important is your answer. There's a sliding scale. And I think there's strong reasons why it is very important, but you do have to decide like what you're going to invest your time in. And I'm always wondering, like, well, I always go the extra mile because that's kind of the kind of guy that I am is like, well, let's go the extra mile. But I wonder, is it worth it? Does it have benefit? And then when I hear even a story like that for somebody who doesn't have a disability with regarding to seeing, but in a certain situation, it pays dividends for you. And so that's motivating.
Yeah. Yeah. The aggressive answer that sometimes I'll give is when I get questions like that, sometimes if I'm in a bad mood and I haven't had my coffee, it's let me rephrase that question of like, who are you willing to exclude? Mm-hmm. Which again doesn't really make you friends. And like in the game of accessibility, I'd rather build bridges and relationships. Sure. So like, I think I have always personally been pleasantly surprised by what I put out on the internet, and especially when I have like alt text. Like I have blind folks on Instagram who've followed me because I take the time to include descriptions, and like my Instagram's really boring. It's just like weird things in nature I find, but
sure,
it's not my business to make the judgment call of like, is this for you or not? It's just like, here it is. If you want to read it or look at it, go for it.
Right. I also have a reader of Changelog News who is vision impaired and will reply to our emails and give me tips, and as well as kudos when I'll do a good, because I'll put memes in there and different images, and I'll try to put it, and sometimes I'll just kind of punt, and the alt will just kind of like say it's a meme of a thing, and it's like it's because I was in a hurry or I didn't exactly know how to describe the thing, and so I just put it in there, and then he'll reply, or he or she, I'm not sure who they are, they'll reply and say, "That was a worthless alt text, dude." And I'm like, dang it.
Yeah.
So like, even though there's probably only a handful of people like that this affects, it affects them in a major way, and they're people too. And so let's look out for them. And like you said, include as many people as possible because why not? Right.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But when it comes to alts, there's other areas where I'm not sure what to say. Like for instance, if you're putting a logo as an image, mm-hmm. and then you want to provide an alt for that, do you just say like, it's the logo, or do you describe what the logo looks like? What do you do for that situation?
Yeah. So it depends, which is the worst answer, but honestly, oftentimes it's...
May have heard that one before.
Oh yeah. Tell me you worked on the web without telling me you worked on the web.
Right.
In the context of like a primary navigation, when you have the logo, say in the upper left-hand corner on a English website, I'll usually do something like home, because then the experience there for a screen reader might be something along the lines of, link, home, and that's informative in a way that's like practical.
I see.
If you're on a, like, say a press download page where it's like all about the brand and all about this is us, this is what we're up to, this is the mode and tune, the mood and tone we want to evoke, that might be the time to describe, what the Starbucks logo looks like.
Right.
And then there's also a little bit of like, maybe just do it once and then every other time just say it's the logo.
Gotcha. That home one is interesting because I haven't thought about using the alt like that. It's almost like providing directions. Now, if that was wrapped inside of an anchor element, for instance, mm-hmm. would the title on the anchor be home? And so you're kind of being redundant at that point, or?
Yeah, I'd just let the image do the work and just wrap it with the anchor and leave it at that.
Okay, so the anchor doesn't need a title in that case?
No, you should be fine. Like, this is, if you want to get to brass tacks here, the title will override the image's alt attribute, but if they're the same, it's kind of a nothing burger. But again, like, just get rid of those title attributes and you're good to go.
Okay. So we're obviously down there in the PicIU details. That seems like where a lot of the accessibility stuff is, though. Like there's probably big picture things you can say about like how to construct a page or how to have like 80% accessibility coverage, but then like it's from like the 80% to the 100% that is where a lot of the it depends is, and the questions, and honestly, like the lack of confidence from even a seasoned developer like myself that makes us kind of just punt and just not do anything at all, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that, again, speaks to kind of that choice paralysis. And like when I'm at work, it's something I always try to keep in the back of my pocket, which is like, this is something that's historically been missing from the front end and honestly back end developer experience. Like it's usually taught, if it's taught at all, for like half an hour in most traditional CS education. Mm-hmm. So like, it puts the person in a really bad spot, which is you're being held accountable to something you didn't even know existed. And then like somebody you've never really interacted with strolls up and tells you like you're wrong and everything you're doing is wrong. And also like, you're hurting people. Like that is not a great feeling.
Yeah.
So there's a person in the disability community whom I really respect, Meryl Evans, and she has this philosophy of progress over perfection. So when you tell me like, yeah, we're at 80%, like I'm like weeping tears of joy because, every little bit helps. And the more you can kind of move the needle, the better. And like the cool thing is, websites aren't bridges. You can go back to what you build and like tweak it and change it. And like, you don't have to get it all in one go.
Yeah, I like that. Progress over perfection. That's definitely a phrase that I've uttered oftentimes to myself or to my teammates or to my wife or whoever, especially us perfectionists. Like we have to remind ourselves that often because the perfection goal is the enemy of progress sometimes. It's the enemy of good. It's like, well, it has to be perfect. Well, it's like, well, it's already good.
Yeah.
Let's ship good and then let's iterate towards perfect. But
yeah, we're already, and it's interesting, we're starting to see like qualitative as well. If you read some of the community feedback, but quantitative results for that kind of mindset where we're investing in our design system primer, making some like structural changes, which has like a really good ripple effect. And like for the human facing impact, that's amazing because that means like more people can use GitHub. And then like for the numbers go up kind of folks, it's great because like our audit risks go down, which means our legal liability goes down. But also like things are just getting generally more stable on the front end perspective because we are encouraging folks to take those bespoke one-off implementations and replace them with something that's been kind of battle tested. And in addition, you just get some accessibility for free.
yeah, I was reading about the work that you did recently. You published this back on the GitHub blog on May 8th of this year about your work on tables specifically and how there have been, as of the writing, I think you said 75 bespoke table implementations across GitHub's vast surface area of HTML templates. I'm sure there's probably thousands of templates out there in the repo. And of course, like you get to a new place and you roll another table. I actually just rolled a table this morning in our admin, because it's like, well, I need another table of things. And so, of course, I just go and copy paste what I did last time because it's an admin and it doesn't need to be accessible to anybody but myself and Adam, pretty much. Mm-hmm. But in your guys' case, you are rolling out this new table, which is built on the primer components. Can you tell me more about that and then just the process of basically replacing all these? Because it probably wasn't just you doing that work, right?
Yeah, no, I was fortunate to partner with Josh Black, Mike Peretti, and then an external consultant, James Schultz. And we created this really nice kind of working cadence, which is my preferred, which is very like anti-waterfall, which is get the design far enough to where it's, you're facing diminishing returns if you make it pixel perfect, switch over to code, break it down into its little atomic pieces. So like for this kind of functionality that we need, like what is a table row? What does it mean? And then review it to make sure it makes sense with assistive technology. And like that really tight feedback cycle means that it sailed through kind of our last final audit process pretty cleanly, which makes me happy. And then to the point of adoption, there's a whole kind of game around ergonomics of providing an API to a consuming developer. And it's like, is this easier to use than rolling your own? And like, if yes, great. If no, like it's probably time to go back to the drawing board. So like you kind of said, like the name of the game is to beat that copy paste the last thing I did. And
right.
So that makes me kind of happy. There's always work to be done, but like I'll take the W here.
Yeah, anytime you can do that as well, you're providing like that same developer speed on future tables. Like maybe this one hurts to go ahead and conform what they did previously into whatever you're providing as an API or a component that they're going to pass properties to and stuff. A lot of times those tables always have like some weird little thing that's different, right? And it's like, well, it's 98% like the ones on every other page, but this one has a filter button up in the upper right hand corner. And so like your thing has to be able to manage as many of those as possible. Isn't that the challenge?
Yeah, there's definitely like you only know what you know phase. So like we kick it out the door, and then there's those kinds of use cases that definitely come in. I think that's like part of the process. And if it doesn't happen, I start to get nervous because I'm like, okay, what's going on here?
No one's using it. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like for things like that, it's definitely a negotiation, because like you want your components to meet people where they are. And then in the same breath, every time there is a one-off little thing, you start to like put on your detective hat and you're like, why is it this way? Why did we kind of break the established standard?
Right.
Is this an opportunity to consolidate so there's more consistency of experience across GitHub? Or is it a situation where we need to fold this functionality in because some constraint somewhere means there's, it's unchangeable.
Right. How do you make that call? It depends.
Yeah. Talk to people.
Sure.
Put on your.
But is there like a number of instances like, okay, we've seen this particular widget inside of a table, whether it's like a sort or a filter or whatever, an emoji picker. And we've seen this once. It's like, well, okay. We got a lot of work to do. Oh, we've seen it twice. Okay, maybe 3 times. All right, let's go ahead and fold it in. Is there something like that?
Yeah, it's that. And then it's also, I'm going to go talk to your boss's boss. And it turns out this is a load bearing button that, brings us in $3 million a year. So
load bearing. I like that. I like that analogy. I've never heard that actually. With regards to buttons, reminds me of the buy now button I ranted about on our last episode. But
yep.
Yeah, I mean, if it's bringing in $3 million a year, there's no it depends, right? It's like, well, we're going to make this one work.
Yep, pretty much. And so like for me, it's like, and it's like what I like to say internally. It's like we can make it happen. It just might take a little bit more time and a little bit more resources. So like if that button is inaccessible, but it's like critical to the business, we can figure it out. We got solutions. Just got to kind of know what we're dealing with and why.
So how far has that table component, which has accessibility baked in as much as you possibly can bake in, right? Obviously, there are last mile things that the user has to do in order to keep it or to go like 100% accessible, if that even is a thing. But how far has that table, which you've had rolled out to 75 instances as of May, is that continuing to proliferate across GitHub's code base? Are you at hundreds of tables now? How are you at?
I haven't checked, to be honest, because it's always like off to the next thing, but I would assume so, just kind of by sheer law of probability. Like GitHub's a really big site.
Yeah.
So we have a really nice tool that one of our developers built that we can kind of query where things are. So I would not be surprised, but in the same breath, like even if it's not, that's nice too, because like numbers are not going down for it, which means that like the experience isn't so bad that people are yanking it out of their templates, which is also a nice thing.
What's very cool about this is it's all out there, primer.style. So you can look at this data table that you guys linked to from the post, which lays out the anatomy, looks like the best practices on how to use it. So this is GitHub stuff, but out there for all. I mean, steal our work? Is that what this is for? Like, go ahead and use it, or is it just more of an example of how you might build a table?
Yeah, I think both. Like, it's the beauty of open source. Like, definitely have my qualms with some of the model, but like, one thing I really believe for front-end accessibility in particular is it shouldn't cost money to do the right thing, which is like, there shouldn't be knowledge hoarding or like proprietary secrets for this stuff. So like, you can, on Primer, you can read about the data table, why we kind of did the choices we did, like what best practices we're recommending. And then you can take the code, inspect it, and, reverse engineer it to your heart's content. And the interesting thing about Primer, and I didn't realize this before I started, is because it is open source, people are using it to build their products as well. And so like, it's wild where it's like, this was made by GitHub for GitHub, but also like there's completely independent businesses out there who are like, I need a UI solution. So they turn to Primer. And so there's some downstream effects I wasn't even thinking about that are
Well, if your front end UI is not like a differentiator and you're okay with that and you just want a good one, it's like, why not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's up, friends? This episode is brought to you by porkbun.com. They offer domain extensions tech professionals need like .app, .dev, and .foo. If you need to showcase your next project, there is a .app for that. If you're building the latest SaaS product that will change the world, you can grab a .dev and show it off to the world. And you can show off your kung.foo programming powers if you're doing other cool stuff. You can also use the .app, .foo, or .dev domain to showcase your digital portfolio and show off your work. They all come with heightened security that benefits you and your visitors. They're designed to be secure. .app and .dev domains are HSTS preloaded, and that means all .app and .dev websites will only load over an encrypted SSL connection. This is, of course, the gold standard of website security. They all require an encrypted connection to load. Fortunately, a free Let's Encrypt SSL certificate is included with every Porkbun domain name registration, and you get the best pricing too, only $1 for the first year for .app, .dev, or .foo domain names. Whois privacy, SSL certificates, web and email hosting trials, they're all free. Why pay for things that should be free? And they have a simple management user interface, manage everything about your new domain name from one place, no hunting around for that feature you need, and they're backed by 5-star support 365 days a year. They have more authentic 5-star reviews from real, actual customers than any other registrar. So next time you need a domain name, get a .app, a .dev, or a .foo domain name at Porkbun for only $1 for the first year. Go to porkbun.com/gsparty24. Again, porkbun.com/gsparty24.
Tell me more about this Primer design system, because I see there's sub-menu items about Figma, Rails, React, etc. Like, what are all the places this plays, and how do you play with it?
Yeah, that's a zesty question. Primer is, I think, one of the, if not the oldest front-end design systems on the internet. And so, as you mentioned, it's kind of like 3 design systems in a trench coat, where there's the Rails experience, which GitHub has historically been built on. There is the React experience, where some of the newer, more dynamic portions of GitHub are getting built out. There's the Figma layer, which is our product designers will turn to that to sketch on kind of initial product work. There's the brand component, which is kind of adjacent to Primer, but also invested in Primer. There's kind of like a UI packages sort of situation for experimental stuff. So Primer is a lot of things, and each one of those is its own kind of special domain. So it's a wild ride to kind of keep it all in your head.
Well, I think you can at least keep it all in your sidebar over there, so people who don't want to check it out.
Oh yeah.
And whether you're working with React or with Rails, I assume those are like server-side template renders and stuff, is all componentized. So check it out if that interests you. I just was thinking of another line of questioning, and I just blanked on it. Give me a second to get it back.
A few moments later.
Well, I got you. I did want to say, I think it was two newsletters ago, you put all the links in order of ascending line length, and I was just like, chef's kiss.
Oh, that's hilarious. You know what? More people appreciate that than you would actually believe. Like, I just did that because I'm being a nerd. You know, I've also done it the other direction.
Yeah.
And people just get geeked out on it. So I've started to do it more often.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like I read for a living, and like it's one of those things where I see that and I'm like, oh, signs of life. Like there's a human on the other end of this.
Well, one of the things that I try to do with the newsletter is like make it as human as possible, even though it has a style and a format. And so like, I just want you to know that, yes, I'm here. You know, I'm not just like, because there's certain newsletters, I won't name names, where it's like, yeah, this is just ChatGPT summarization, you know, and I don't want that to be ever. I mean, it's never going to be changelog news. And I want to make that clear. And so I do little things like that. And yeah, that one in particular nerds love. I'm not sure why. I think it is somewhat as just aesthetically pleasing just to like see it that way.
Yeah, there's some like deep part of my brain that's like, the little endorphins light up where it's like, ooh, yeah.
Well, shoot, now I got to leave this part in because it's such a nice compliment. We'll leave that in there. Jason, we'll figure it out somehow. You can even just leave the slow dramatic pause of me trying to remember my line of questioning, which I remembered it as you went. So thank you for that, Eric. I was talking with Zach Leatherman recently on the show, who I've known for a long time, and he is just expert in lots of things, performance, accessibility, the list could go on. And in that conversation, I was like, dang, Zach, you know so much of this stuff, and I wonder how you got to know all of this stuff and then how we get everybody else to know. Because with perf, it's a very similar thing with accessibility insofar as the devil's in the details. It's very important, but also pushed to the end a lot, which means that it has to have advocates. I think Google has pushed perf higher up the value chain because of their insistence on using it for PageRank, stuff like that. But you can still shoot yourself in the foot pretty easily, and there's a lack of confidence. And web devs have to learn tons of stuff anyways. Like, I'm talking about surface area. There's such a breadth to what you need to know to be a web developer, whether you're front end, back end, full stack. How did you get where you are with accessibility? I mean, to know all of these things, and then how can we educate? How can we bring others along? Or is the answer to put it in the tooling? I'll just open that up for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And shout out to Zach, who is a good bean. A big 11y fan over here. That's a really big question. And I think for me personally, the most success that I've had is to collaborate. And I used to think that this was something that like everybody should know and do. And I still kind of believe that at a very high level, but to a certain extent, it is a specialty. And there are specialists within the web field. And so for me, again, like I'd like to turn to that progress over perfection mindset, which is what can you do to move the needle a little bit? So like, can you add Axe CI checks to your code to catch stuff before you merge it in? Because usually that's code level stuff of like, hey, bud, like you did this and you should probably do that instead. And usually that's not like a end of the world refactor fire. It's usually like, change this one attribute to this other attribute. And that's great because like it's an omniscient robot scanning your code base, kind of just telling you like, 6 should be a 7 here. And, it's not somebody leaning over your shoulder being like, that's bad and you should feel bad. And kind of within that, like the uncomfortable truth is for a lot of web accessibility, the bar is in hell. So every little bit you can do to improve it helps. So
if we just hang out there on that one tip, what's the easy button for doing that? Let's just assume a GitHub Actions workflow.
Yeah. Axe, which is produced by a company called DeQ, puts out a suite of tools. There are paid CI checks, which we use a modified version of, augmented by some internal stuff. There's also a browser extension that is kind of a way to sell the services for if you have money to spend for this kind of thing. And that's free. You can just run it and it'll scan the page or a portion of the page, tell you what the problem is. And then my favorite part is they have a link to their internal knowledge base. So if you're like, this is a lot of jargon I don't understand, I can click the button, it'll pop open a browser window tab, and you can just read to your heart's content about like what they're saying when they say it. And a lot of it is like, what's the problem? How do you fix it? And then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Very cool. I will scoop this up. dq.com/axe. Looks like the place to get started. We'll put that in the show notes for anybody who just wants to go out and grab the Chrome extension or learn more, etc. Nice sales pitch for these folks. Is there alternatives? Is there competition? Are there other things you can use?
Yeah, there's a few other in the market. There's the ARC toolkit put out by a company called TPGI, formerly the Paciello Group. There's a few others. To be honest, I've found them to be a little less comprehensive than the other two. And so like I encourage the competition in the market, but free and comprehensive is pretty hard to turn your nose up at.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. I'll link up that one. as well. I mean, I think even if it's just installing that Chrome extension and pointing it at your website, I mean, that's going to be valuable to a lot of folks because, like you said, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's like single line changes, single attribute changes. There's also structural ways that you can be more or less accessible, aren't there? I mean, those to me seem like the harder way. It's like your layout, the way that you order your HTML elements, stuff like this. Does that kind of stuff matter too?
It does. And like the good news is like there's two things that are really working in your favor, which is left to right, top to bottom. So if you write your markup in the order that you read it, you're probably not going to have problems. And the other is Ethan Marcotte's Miracle of Responsive Web Design does a lot to prevent content loss. So like if it works on mobile and it goes in a logical reading order, you're pretty much set for a lot of like weird gotchas. The other thing I'd recommend is headings. So H2, H3, H4, H5, H6 is the number one way people who use screen readers navigate. And that basically like think about like when you hit a new website and you're just kind of looking for that one little line of code you need or that one little paragraph. And so you like scroll up and down and kind of flit around and be like, where is it? Oh my God, I don't care about your life story. Like, I just want to know how many servings it makes. And so the heading, jumping by heading is kind of the same thing where it's just like, okay, what's this subsection about? What's this subsection about? Oh, that sounds relevant. I'm going to dig in here. So there's a browser extension that I really love called Headings Map, and it shows your heading structure in a tree view and lets you click and navigate around. It'll also flag where like there might be problems. And maybe just spend a lunch session kind of just reading up on the heading elements, and that'll do a lot to really help folks out.
It looks like Headings Map is available for Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. Good on them.
Oh, yeah.
I was just about to complain because it's like everything's just a Chrome extension. You know, some of us don't use Chrome anymore, but there it is.
Yeah.
I'm just gathering up links for the show notes as you talk, and I'm thinking, I wish this was available outside. Oh, look at that. They do it. They do cross-platform extensions. I mean, those are people who care right there.
I mean, I'm going to be spicy here. Like, I wish the browser had this built in because, like,
yeah, dude.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you hit up like a Wikipedia page and it's like 5 miles long of scrolling, like, I want to know what's going on before I really dig in.
Yeah, totally. Now, Wikipedia does provide some hierarchy on the right-hand sidebar, but oftentimes, especially on smaller devices, that'll be hidden for responsive web design purposes. But yeah, if you could have just a headings based outline automatically on any web page, that would be a cool browser feature for sure. Cool. What else should we talk about in the world of accessibility? I mean, you've been doing this, you've been writing about it a ton. What else is interesting to you, or that you would point out to our listener as something that they should think about, do, know? Yeah.
I think like I want to echo again kind of your comment on like not knowing where to start or like thinking like it's too big. Another resource that we created is on the a11y project, accessibilityproject.com. We have a checklist, and again, this kind of speaks to my belief that this sort of knowledge you shouldn't have to pay for. And so it's a open source, free, relatively plain language breakdown of the web content accessibility guidelines, and is presented in a checklist format. You don't have to observe the checklist, but you can definitely scan through it. And that gives you a really good kind of like 10,000 foot view of things you should be on the lookout for. It has considerations for things like color, for things like hierarchy and reading order. And the whole goal there was like to try to take this like very dense, arcane, honestly, sometimes like cryptic messaging when you read the letter of the law, and distill it down into something that like a project manager can scan and like incorporate into their acceptance criteria, or you as a developer can read and be like, oh, okay, that's what they mean when they say this.
Okay, party people, this one's for you. I've got just 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for freelancers, agencies, and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less on Studio. Number 1, integrate, extend, and write custom scripts in a VS Code-based IDE. 2, leverage zero setup dev, test, and production environments. 3, ship faster with an AI code assistant. And 4, work with Wix headless APIs on any tech stack. Wix Studio is for devs who build websites, sell apps, go headless, or manage clients. Well, my time is up, but the list keeps going on. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Go to wix.com/studio. Once again, wix.com/studio.
You know, a lot of times with accessibility, I feel like I often focus on like the argumentation, like the why. And because we all have deadlines and lives and decisions to make, and like a lot of times you need to be sold to the ones who aren't paying attention. Like they need to be sold on why they need to pay attention. And that's why I think with performance in particular, like Google providing that carrot was such a huge win. And it seems like with accessibility, there are a few small carrots. Like there are reasons why it just provides better overall usability for everybody. I mean, you even described one case where as a non-disabled person, you still had an accessibility win in a circumstance where you didn't have internet, for instance. But there's also a stick, it turns out. The EU is forming a stick and slapping people with it, right? Isn't there a new law that's either in the works or has passed in the EU about this stuff?
Yeah, it's coming. There's upcoming regulation for Europe, which is a big place, that basically has stipulations for the private sector, the way currently in the United States, government services and government adjacent services need to provide accessibility. And so, you know, I'm going to set aside like the motivation and why you should care. But like, I'm of the school of thought that like, you know, given that a glance and starting to think about like, if you do business in the EU or you want to do business in the EU, how you can kind of proactively start to build some bridges and, you know, set up some stuff internally for what you do to get ready for it. We're internally at GitHub already starting to have those conversations because we definitely do business in the EU as a global company. And
Right.
It's one of those things where it's like some people, you know, higher up the leadership chain didn't know it was coming, but having an answer already in place for them helped to take a lot of that initial panic and be like, nope, got it handled, got a plan. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing
Right.
it.
Yeah, that's how you can become a hero inside your organization, is when that hammer drops and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh no, we need to be in compliance with this stuff. You're like, hey, we've already been doing our due diligence all along, so you're good to go. Do you have any idea the form of that, like the actual nitty gritty of like what it will mean, what you'll have to provide, what you have to do, and what the consequences are going to be? Or is it too early for that kind of stuff?
I think it's a little too early, but if I could wager a guess, I think it'll be a lot of when it comes to discovery in case of like a lawsuit or legal action, it'll probably be taking that criteria and using it to determine if somebody is at fault or not, which I think like personally is well and fine and good in that there is a baseline. It is legal law. It is established, and you know, it's going to be less ambiguous, and a lot of accessibility can be ambiguous, which is why we do have the web content accessibility guidelines. So like if it comes to it, you can kind of go down the list and be like, for this kind of standard that applies to multiple governing bodies, it's an ISO standard, which is wild. You can say like yes or no, and that really helps for some of the subjectivity, because disability is not a binary and it can impact individuals in a lot of different ways. So like it's a good way to kind of take some of that fuzziness and translate it into something that where you can like determine in a legal context, yes, no, you know, are your civil rights being violated? Yes or no? Here's why.
Right. Now, what are the odds that this particular legislation backfires, just like the cookie laws backfired, where it's like, you know, people are going to stop tracking. They're like, no, we're just going to put annoying cookie banners everywhere and just continue to track you, but you have to agree to it first.
Yeah, I think the two things I'm really worried about there, three things. Cookie law is definitely one of them. Second is going to be well-intentioned people trying to capitalize on it and doing more harm than good. That's a whole side conversation. I think there's going to be an initial kind of scramble. But the thing that I'd like to specifically talk about here is I think accessibility overlay companies are going to predate on a lot of well-intentioned people who only want to do the right thing. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the drama surrounding accessibility overlay companies, but
No.
Okay.
Tell me about it. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. So there is a phenomenon on the web where, as you kind of described, people say web accessibility is hard. And so they go to search for how to fix it. And there is a few companies in this area who have a, one-line code fix solution that pops up a little overlay, for lack of a better term, that air quote fixes your accessibility problems. And there's a few problems with this. First and foremost, they don't work. So false advertising.
That is problematic, yes.
Secondly, a lot of disabled individuals, and you can check out some of the particulars here in the overlayfactsheet.com. They actually say the experience makes it worse. So people who use assistive technology on websites that have accessibility overlays are like, this turned it from like annoying but usable to absolutely unusable. So, God help you if you want to order a pizza and suddenly, these nice people that run the local pizza parlor put this code in and suddenly you're prevented from doing that because they wanted to do the right thing. Like, that sucks. There's actually been court cases where we proved in a legal context and have actually helped to provide evidence as an auditor that they don't do what they say. They just have the benefit of a ton of SEO goodness and venture capital to kind of override other solutions that are actually more long-term and sustainable. So there's also the fact that it's kind of spyware in that a lot of these companies don't disclose what they do with their data, and in opposition to a lot of European data privacy laws. And that gets into a really uncomfortable situation where the majority of assistive technology when interfacing with web content, and this is the same thing for kind of like browser privacy, you don't want individual people to be de-anonymized for a variety of reasons, but in a medical context especially. So we don't know if they're tracking people and selling that information to third-party brokers. We don't know if they're compiling like lists or what they're doing with that information. And they're also not answering to requests to disclose that through established channels. So basically the TLDR here is big yikes, avoid overlay companies, especially if you actually want to help people.
That's good to know. I literally had never heard of this, and I feel like I know generally what's going on out there in the web. So this is it seems like a blind spot for me, pun not intended. How do they work technically? Like what are these overlays? Is it a JavaScript snippet? Like, do you have any idea what they're doing? And then what are they actually doing to your page that they claim is making it better?
Yeah, so it's functionally a lot like those little chat bubbles in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen where it's pops up an agent that's just chat GPT and you just scream for a
human.
A human.
Yeah.
They basically pull a lot of different party tricks, which is just running some arbitrary JavaScript to do stuff like flip the background colors or bump the text size or clamp your line length. And the interesting thing is sometimes it kind of sort of works. A lot of the time it doesn't, because there's so many different ways to implement a UI, and this JS isn't necessarily always robust enough to actually do the thing it's going to do. A further irony is some of these overlay widgets are actually inaccessible to assistive technology. So if you try to click that button to help you out, it actually just doesn't work.
Because there's something in the way, or there's literally...
They just built it bad.
Just built bad.
Yeah. And so the really interesting thing here is there are established ways for people to get around these kinds of things. And that's good. I think that's one of the strengths of the web, which is if you don't like it, you can change it. There's lots of extensions out there. There's lots of browser preferences, operating system preferences. And the really important bit is when you go onto the internet, you don't go onto the internet to use, Jim's Jerky Shop 24/7. So it's if you do make those tweaks to this website, they don't carry over to other experiences. So say you have a traumatic brain injury and you are sensitive to extreme contrasts in colors, and that gives you migraines and pain and fatigue. Like, that's not your fault. But what you can do is use the operating system's color overlay feature to kind of like even and normalize the colors and like reduce that eye strain and therefore reduce your pain. That's something that you can do. That's something that an overlay widget can't do. There's also a browser extension that a few friends I have use called Midnight Lizard, which is a great name.
I like it. Midnight Lizard, huh?
And all it does is really just normalize colors across the web. And that's one of those, like, if that's what you need to make things work, like make websites look a little bit more perceptually uniform, just so you can kind of like have a more guaranteed experience, like, great, go for it. Yeah. Get what you need. I don't care.
I love it. It's your web, make it the way you want to in order to make it more enjoyable or even useful when it might not even be usable. There are a handful. I'm seeing some overlay blockers in the various extension worlds. It seems like these might be more about overlays of like a subscribe to our newsletter overlay versus an actual like accessibility overlay though.
Yeah. Well, let me flip the script for a second. Like, do you use any web extensions to make the web a little more tolerable for yourself?
That's a really good question. I'm somewhat of a vanilla kind of a person. I'm now going to look at my list of extensions and see if I can. I did use Tweaks for Twitter for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that broke at some point, probably right around the time that you would think it would break.
R.I.P.
Yeah, when it no longer became Twitter. And in my younger years, I did all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was was it Grease Monkey was the name of the Firefox thing? Yeah, where you could just run your own stuff on every website. And I would tweak almost every website that I went to that I went to often. Mm-hmm. I would be like, this is going to be the way I want it to look. Nowadays, not so much. So I do have, just besides ad blockers and privacy stuff, all I have installed in this particular browser is Tweaks for Twitter, and it's turned off. I have Open in Ivory, which is just a Mastodon integration. So you can, like, if you're on a Mastodon page, click on that little button, and it just opens it up inside of Ivory, which is a Fediverse client, and then just add guards and stuff. That's about it. How about you?
Too many. Plead the fifth. But yeah, I wanna kind of push a little bit on the ad blocker because a dirty little secret in the accessibility world is ad blocking can be considered assistive technology, and here's a reason for that. The same way you don't want to be distracted by like a banner ad that comes in that's like flashing and distracting. Uh-huh. If you're photosensitive and you can get seizures on the web, that's something that you as a consumer can do to kind of protect yourself. And, irritation is kind of one end of the spectrum, like writhing on the floor seizing is the other. So if you can sidestep that by installing an ad blocker, you should be able to, at least until there's better regulations in this space. Because like, as we both know, it's a little bit of the Wild West.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that you should be able to do whatever the heck you want to do with your browser. And so I think ad blocking is totally fair game. Like, you're sending your thing into my computer, and I should be able to take or not take that thing that you're giving me. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's buck wild when you think about it with hindsight, though. Like, you can execute arbitrary JavaScript on another website from one website.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, here we are.
Here we are. Good stuff, Eric. So connecting with you, looks like ericbailey.website. Is that the one place we should send people, or are there additional places where people can get in hold of you? And
Yeah. ericwbailey.website. I got links in the footer if you are so inclined. I'm on Mastodon. I'm on Blue Sky, waiting for the dust to kind of settle for like where the people go.
Right.
Flirted with Threads. I don't think it's for me. I am still processing my feelings on Twitter. And
sure.
Email also works too. I do offer office hours as well, and those are for free. And basically,
cool.
The web's been really good to my life and my career, and accessibility is a huge gnarled knot. And like, if you have questions, hopefully I can help you. I'd rather pay it forward if I can and get you situated. So, feel free to reach out if that's something you're interested in too.
Very cool. I love that. Office hours. That's quite an offer. And when you think about the one thing we have in this life is time. We can't buy it back. So just giving that away to people who are interested, I think is a big deal. I think that's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Spent about an hour with me. Great to meet you. Great to hear about your work and all of the things you're doing at GitHub and your writing, which I enjoy very much. So keep up the good work. To our listener, all the links to all the things are in your show notes, including every extension I think that we mentioned along the way, if I did my job. So check those out. They are completely accessible to you via the show notes button in your podcast app or browser of choice. So Eric, thanks again. This is JS Party for this week. That's all from me. We'll talk to y'all on the next one. Next up on the pod, Nick and I sit down with Simon Wickmans, an expert in monitoring, securing, and optimizing third-party scripts, to discuss the Polyfill IO attack in detail and what it means for web devs and client-side security going forward. Subscribe now so you don't miss it at jsparty.fm or by searching for JS Party wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks once again to our partners at Fly.io, to our Beat Freakin' residents, Breakmaster Cylinder, and to our sponsors of this episode, Pork Bun and Wix. Please do support our sponsors. They help make JS Party happen. That's all for now, but come back and party with us again next week.
A11y.